2025 has ushered in a year of turbulence. Whether it's climate change and dramatic events like the fires in Los Angeles, a new president of the United States who seems to be wanting to make a lot of changes. Many things in the world are just as turbulent as last year and the year before, but it seems like there's more of it. What can we do? How can we respond? I think the world is moving as a result of challenges towards greater understanding. This is the teaching of the lineage of self-realization, specifically Paramahansa Yogananda, autobiography of a yogi being his life story, and very famous throughout the world, said, based on the findings of his own guru, Swami Sri Yukteswar, is that this planet, human consciousness, believe it or not, is in an ascending age of awareness. Now, despite the confusion and even violence, etc., that is taking place on the world, these things are considered to be the breakdown of old structures, old belief systems. Millions of people turning their back on orthodox religions and cultures of the past being dismantled by travel, education, new aspirations, millions of people migrating from one country to another country. This is a time of great change. But what it's propelling the world civilization of humanity towards is to go within, to find our values in our own self. Formerly, it was more typical to take your values from society, from religion, and from your parents, and so forth. All of that's perfectly fine, but it's not our impulse. It's not what we're reaching for as a rule and in general, because there are many people who still follow the old-time religion of values and structures and institutions. There is, in fact, a great battle going on throughout the planet between the old and the new. And sometimes the new isn't all that inspiring. It's more bent on tearing things down and doing what I please and what pleases me than looking for truth and what is best for all. So it's a turbulent time. But this turbulence apparently will continue for a very long time, even hopefully so, that it will have a long period of peacefulness in the sort of outer realm of things. At least Yogananda said it would at some point. Nonetheless, the turbulence, we live more in our emotions, in our thoughts, in our aspirations. In a former time, if you were a serf or a slave or whatever, you didn't really have any aspirations. You didn't know much about anything other than what you did day to day. Well, that's not the case increasingly throughout the world. And so increasingly throughout the world, what becomes important to people is what's going on inside of them, in their hearts, in their minds. The mind is the wielder of muscles, the mind is the wielder of truth, or the victim of delusion. And so it is to the mind that, over the centuries to come, people will turn within to realize its substantive impact, meaning, and nature, and reality. Whether it's quantum physics or astrophysics, the world around us is saying, hey, what's out here and what you see and touch and feel, etc., is not as real as it might seem. It's not that it isn't real on its own level. It's just that it's not the essential, not the elemental reality, notwithstanding appearances. And so this is where we're being pushed. Now, millions of us who meditate and so on are already marching in that direction, but there's a lot more people who haven't got the memo, so to speak. But this will come in time. The other thing is to balance the intensity of that self-involvement, that emphasis of the self, will have to be community. We, we can't all going on living just for ourselves. Resources won't permit the obvious results of that. You're talking about you're talking about boom and bust economies and violence for the haves and the have-nots. We see plenty of that already. Not that any of that's really new. But there will in other words, the values that we've lost will be internalized and found within. And the basic core value of them all was expressed in the Old Testament and by Jesus, who affirmed it for himself, which is to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, and soul, and strength, and to love your neighbor as thyself. It's really not complicated, but the way to get there authentically is to go within, at least for this age. In former times, and for some people, the outer values and the outer affirmations and rules and so forth will continue to be where they look for those values, and that's perfectly fine if the values are positive to begin with. But this is where we're moving towards. And so it may be destructive in many ways and to many people. There is an overarching, you could say, plan, or at least understanding. And in the autobiography of a yogi, there's a sentence where Yogananda says that the great saints of Mahavatar Babaji and Lord Jesus Christ, one with a body still and alive in that way, and one without a body but still omnipresent, are guiding the spiritual evolution of this planet. Now, obviously, on a planet like ours, which isn't all that spiritual to begin with, the spiritual evolution won't necessarily be of interest to many and maybe most people. But the power of the mind, the power of the soul, the power of attunement with the Creator is a force far greater than the self-defeating, polarized forces of people who are still stuck in material consciousness and ego consciousness. So yes, there are troubled times ahead. Jesus Christ told his disciples that there will always be wars and earthquakes and this sort of thing. So the place to take refuge is in the Dharma, in the righteousness of our relationship with our Creator and our true self, and by extension with all life that surrounds us. So be of good cheer.